Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to Port Perspectives. Port Perspective is our podcast that we do to talk with CEOs and senior industry leaders to find out what they're doing in their life, how they got there, what's happening in their particular area of the world. And we have found it to be very intriguing and very interesting, particularly for young managers coming up in the industry. So there's always been some great insights into all of these conversations. I'm Captain Jeff Monroe. I'm the Director of Education and Standards for the IAMPE, the International Association of Maritime Port Executives. And we are privileged and honored today to have Jonathan Daniels, who is with the Maryland Port Administration and the Port Director for the Port of Baltimore. Welcome, Jonathan, and it's so nice to have you with us today.
Captain, it's great to be here with you and great to see you again.
And it is. And Jonathan, you have had a very interesting career. And I always emphasize to people in the industry, particularly when I do commissioner seminars, this is that you really want the very best of people who have got a great deal of industry experience. And you're one of those people who have brought a huge amount of industry experience to your current position. Tell us a little bit about the path that you took.
Sure, and I actually come up and I was brought up a little bit with my family in that regard. So I got early exposure to the industry. My grandfather was a longshoreman at the port of Erie. He used to tell us and spin his yarns about what he had done on dealing with the ore boats at all times of the year up on the Great Lakes. My father actually started out in that direction as well. Started out as a grain shovelman, as a member of the longshore crew at the port of Erie, but realized after a couple of years that that's tough work to be able to do that day in and day out. Certainly have the respect for the work that they did. I did, but after that, I didn't necessarily grow up in that business. My father was, after he decided to go to college, was a college football coach for 30 years. I actually started out in that industry as well at a small Division III school up in Maine called Maine Maritime Academy. And that was my true exposure to the industry. Had the opportunity to work in the administration, and after serving as a company officer and spending time on the annual training cruise with responsibility for two companies of men and women that were seeking careers on the seas, I was hooked. The first port of call that we had was Gibraltar. And after watching an agent do his work during that period of time, he walked on, had the massive bag phone, was making calls, trying to make sure he was arranging for stores, for provisions, for bunkers, and all of that. I truly was enthralled with the industry itself and the port operations side. Of course, Maine Maritime Academy with the international business and the logistics and the maritime management master's degree at that point. I decided to then uh, pursue a position in the maritime industry. I was fortunate enough as I was going through the master's program to be able to accept a position as the port director at the Port of Eastport, the extreme northeast corner. You can't go any further in the United States, stay on the water, and be in and be in the U.S. Our offices looked off onto Campobello Island and New Brunswick. So that was a great area for me to be able to get involved in it with a smaller port, going through some of the education I'd gone through and the exposure from there. And my first task was to build a port at the Estes Head Cargo Terminal. For a lot of years, the Port of Eastport was in their downtown breakwater facility. And I remember the very first day that I walked in the office. About 5 minutes later, John Sullivan, who was the chairman of the board, walked in, asked me to come into the board area with him. He had two massive sets of plans underneath his arm. He threw them on the board table. He looked at them and he said, "That's the pier design. That's the shoreside design. They're 35% done. Finish the plans, find the money to be able to build this new facility, and you need to do it in about 3 years." About three and a so then, and at that point, he just walked out. And so that was my introduction to my port world. And about 3.5 years later, we actually cut the ribbon. We had at the time Governor, now Senator Angus King, stand with us, cut the ribbon with the members of the NELA, which is the longshore crew up there, and several hundred people that came in to be able to celebrate this new facility and this new maritime infrastructure piece of property for us. That really got me very much involved in it. From that point, I ended up going and working for the state of Maine in their international trade office. But then, as I think a lot of people talk about in the maritime industry, and especially with ports, you can kind of move to the side, but you're always brought back. Soon after going and working for the state of Maine, I was hired as the managing director at the Port of Greater Baton Rouge down on the Mississippi River. It's the head of deepwater navigation at mile marker 254, and was absolutely an incredible experience. The size of the port, the amount of vessels that we would accommodate, the jurisdiction of it. And I think some one thing as well, which is oftentimes underappreciated in the work that we do, exposure to a political environment that was very difficult.
Mm.
Is that politics pervades themselves through the work that we do on the waterfront, and the exposure down in Louisiana, which is certainly known for its political uh, activities, really provided me the opportunity to begin to really get a well-rounded exposure into the maritime industry. While we were down there, had a family in that area with me during that period of time. 9/11 occurred. And I think at that point, a lot of people started to think about kind of their trajectory in their career. Family became very important. Certainly at that point, a lot of the thoughts of the insular patterns of the family, and making sure that we were taking care of each other at that point. Uh, that occurred, and I was recruited to take a position back in Maine, still with a transportation bent to it. As I went to work for the city of Bangor, one of the responsibilities that I had there was oversight of Bangor International Airport. And so I looked at that as an opportunity to be able to expand upon my transportation knowledge, gain some truly practical knowledge during that period of time. And with that, I think that continued my education and allowed me the opportunity really to take it the way and look at the way in which transportation meshes together. On the air side, certainly a strong air cargo and general aviation activities. Certainly, as you know those facilities very well, Captain,
Oh,
with,
yeah.
with
And
with the work that you've done. Then went to after spending time in Bangor, was hired as the president and CEO of Eastern Maine Development Corporation. Uh, During that period of time, I was put on the board of directors of the Port of Eastport. Worked with Governor Baldacci at that point, on the capacity of evaluating Sears Island as a container port, with what was going on over at Mac Point with Sprague Energy and the work that they were doing at the Port of Searsport. So I always maintained some level of transportation, and particularly toward the ports, and then was hired as the port director of the Port of Oswego on Lake Ontario. So for me, it was an opportunity to be third generation, to work on the Great Lakes, following in my grandfather and father's footsteps. And then 7 years later, was hired as the executive director and CEO of the Mississippi State Port Authority, and the Port of Gulfport. That was one instance where I had the opportunity. I knew exactly what I was getting into. Following up on Hurricane Katrina, they were going through about a $600 million rebuilding and reconstruction program after the Port of Gulfport was basically wiped off the face of the earth. And while a lot of people were talking about what was going on in some of the other areas on the Gulf Coast, because of that little jog to the east of Hurricane Katrina, Gulfport and the Port of Gulfport were wiped out.
mm,
So I had the honor and the pleasure of representing the state as the state's port director, on dealing with the rebuild aspects of it, making sure that we were expending the federal funds in a necessary way. And we also had a job requirement and a job creation bogey associated with that. A little bit different with disaster recovery money being used, but we had to create at least 1,200 jobs associated with that. It's difficult to do on a port site. We all know as new equipment that comes on, things get a little bit more efficient, that it's hard to be able to create those jobs. But we actually met that job requirement. And about 5 years after I arrived there, we cut the ribbon on a rebuilt Port of Gulfport, and they're seeing great strides in their ability to be able to grow their partnership with Ports America, and the work that they do with the longshoremen down there. That really has the opportunity to be able to grow well into the future. And John Nass, who's down there now as the port director, followed me, has done a great job, and I'm certainly I watch what goes on there with great interest, and have a personal stake in that. So I watch what John's doing, and seeing their progress, and how they're going, and even diversifying a little bit outside the cargo activities, but still on the maritime side of it with the oceanographic research that occurs there, with the University of Southern Mississippi and the other relationships that were developed while we were there, and that John certainly has been able to continue and to grow. Following up on what occurred there and the success that we had in Gulfport, I had the opportunity to become the executive director, port director, and CEO of Port Everglades in South Florida. A little bit different from my previous work and previous experience, with a focus on the cruise industry. It's the third busiest cruise home port in the world. This year, they went above 4 million passengers for the first time, so certainly met that goal. We were able to bring in some new opportunities, brought in Disney, brought in some of the ultra high luxury. We took advantage of our downtime during the pandemic to really take a look strategically at how we were attempting to be able to grow as a port. We were a very diverse port with our cargo and container opportunities. The energy, it's an energy center with about 130 million barrels of petroleum products that move through on an annual basis, and of course the strong cruise business. So we wanted to be able to diversify even a little bit more, even if just diversifying within our particular business lines.
Hmm.
And so we were able to during that downtime, we were able to renegotiate some of our cruise deals. We were able to work with some of the lines, be able to expand upon, add some Asian routes, and bring in MSC even as a stronger partner with some of the resources that they have. And so we really came out of that in a much stronger position. And we also then started right before my departure. We started our update on the 20-year master vision plan, utilizing strategic planning and utilize the planning process to make sure that we could diversify and come out of that in a little bit of a stronger fashion. Had the opportunity, was provided the opportunity to consider coming to the state of Maryland and serving as the executive director of the Maryland Port Administration and the Port of Baltimore. For me, this was a little bit of a different move. Strategically, certainly we know the reputation that the Port of Baltimore has from 1706, one of the oldest ports historically, and has had success since that period of time. It's really a city that grew up around the port. The port actually started about 23 years before the incorporation of the city of Baltimore. So it really was an instance where the transportation assets, the railroad, everything else surrounding that, with the great port facilities, allowed for a community to be able to grow up around it, the industry to be able to grow up around that. And I'm proud to be the 12th port director and executive director of MPA. We fall under the Department of Transportation, so we have an incredible resource base available to us to be able to grow. I have the opportunity to oversee the 6 industrial terminals that are owned by the state of Maryland and by the Department of Transportation and managed by MPA. And then we have 33 private terminals that join in with the public facilities to make up the overarching Port of Baltimore. Just this past year, we did 52.3 million tons across the docks. It makes us number 9 in the United States. We're number 9 when it comes to value of cargo that moves across the docks as well, at $80.8 billion on an annual basis. We support more than 270,000 Marylanders in the employment realm, and there's almost 21,000 jobs that are directly impacted by the activities associated with the port, and an annual impact of about $70.7 billion on an annual basis. We have carved out a very interesting niche here. Is that we are number 1 when it comes to roll on, roll off, when it comes to automobiles like trucks. We have been in that position for the past 13 years. We'll see what those numbers look like coming off the incident that we had that occurred earlier this year, as to where those numbers are ultimately going to fall. But in 2023, we moved almost 850,000 vehicles and light trucks, and that's across so many of the brands. We move about 100,000 Mazdas into the port annually, and we also move about 1,600 McLarens. So that shows that everything that you see on the road out there today, whether it's what you see significantly on the Mazdas, some of the other brands that we have moved through here, and then the customized features of the McLaren. So I think it does show the way in which we do our processing here. We have 4 separate processors that bring in the vessels, bring in the automobiles, and then process here, and then be able to distribute into the region. We're number 11 when it comes to handling containers at about 1.1 million TEUs on an annual basis. And we have a strong Asian market, strong Med market, strong Northern Europe market. And we're getting ready in the not too distant future to announce about 5 additional services that will be coming in. A couple of them are the resurrection of services that fell by the wayside for a variety of geopolitical reasons, change in deployment, change throughout the industry as they're getting more vessels into those lines to be able to resurrect them again, and a couple of new lines as well. So it allows us the opportunity to really take a look and being able to expand. So our numbers right now, we average about 3,500 gate transactions on a daily basis. By the end of the first quarter of 2025, we should be looking at adding about 1,000 additional gate transactions per day, and
Mhm.
that's all based on the new services that we're going to be bringing in. And on the cruise side as well, Port of Baltimore is a great cruise home port, home to both Royal Caribbean and Carnival. We just signed a new agreement with Carnival, a 5-year agreement with a 5-year option for home port operations. We just celebrated 20 years with them, so the opportunity to keep them here for an additional up to 10 years for us and for the tourism and hospitality business is very exciting. So, my move here allows me the opportunity, I think, to utilize all aspects of the career that I've been able to develop in economic development and port management, as well as coaching. A lot of what we do here is based on quick change, and so learning that early on in my career, watching my father in the work that he did, carrying that on into the work that I do, allows us the opportunity to quickly adapt, quickly change as is necessary. And we all know that next phone call coming into a port can mean a lot of different things. And so, how we react to that, how we react to that quick change, catastrophic events that occur, ultimately, that's how we as port directors and as ports are judged. It has been an absolutely fantastic career for me thus far. I still have a ways to go. We're a small fraternity, so it's amazing the people that we run into early in our career and have the opportunity to be able to draw upon our experiences with them, grow from that, and actually end up running back into each other later in our career. Again, it's every day is an education, and every day is an opportunity for us to look at ways in which we can impact the economy.
I always tell people that we know each other in the industry, and sometimes we know too much about each other in the industry, which is always.
Absolutely,
And you
absolutely.
and you were there just a very short time, and of course the bridge incident happened and
Yes.
stuff like that. But you had a lot of support in getting back up and running, didn't you?
We did. I tell you, I've never seen. I've had the opportunity, as we had talked about a little bit, from the rebuild of after Hurricane Katrina. Yep, from the rebuild after Hurricane Katrina to coming out of the pandemic stronger down at Port Everglades. I've never seen a group come together and cooperate at all levels of government. The federal government stepping in that very first morning, the state and the leadership of the Moore Miller administration, and the great job in establishing the priorities from Governor Moore. My direct boss, Secretary Paul Wiedefeld, with the Department of Transportation for the state of Maryland, and our staff here. And oftentimes, what we do is we train for catastrophic events. We train for issues to occur within ports, but they're on the tabletop. The
Mhm.
opportunity to see that come to practice, the short duration of time under which we were able to get everything cleared up and get the port back up and going was due to a level of cooperation by the U.S. Coast Guard, by the Army Corps of Engineers, utilizing the incident command system, the unified command structure, really allowed us the opportunity to have that leadership as a group to be able to move forward, always understanding what the priorities were as were established on the first day by the governor, always holding sight to that and realizing everything needed to be done in a safe manner.
Mhm. Yeah, and it was a phenomenal job. I have to say that it was a very quick turnaround. Tell me, as you're looking forward and moving into the thing, you're moving things around, you're redeveloping your sites, you've got new equipment coming on board and everything. How have you used strategic planning in this process? All right, how have you looked forward with the aspect of strategic? And we always emphasize, particularly to our students, strategic planning is such a key issue of everything that we do. right?
Yes.
That you just don't throw stuff against a wall and hope it's going to stick, right? But how have you guys used it effectively, not only in Baltimore, but
Yeah.
in other locations?
Yeah, certainly. And you talk about and hope it sticks. Hope is not a tactic for development. You
Yeah.
can't hope things are going to work out. Eventually, you may hit some successes, but ultimately, you have to have a solid strategic plan. We have not had an updated strategic plan here for a long period of time, but we still go back to the historic nature of that strategic plan, and we're looking at it really in two ways. We're looking at our strategic plan both and we're developing it right now, our strategic business plan. That's that 3 to 5 year model that we use and will use going forward. It's flexible, it's nimble, it's that quick change that's necessary if you end up with a specific event. If there's something that happens geopolitically and you have a shutdown of certain activities associated with the port, then what do we do? What do we do next? The great part about that is internally developed. Is that and it's not led purely by the executive and a lot of executive teams. It's not wrong, but a lot of executive teams throughout ports and throughout organizations utilize the executive team, and then they push down the findings, the goals, the objectives, vision, and mission down to the rest of the staff. What we have done is we have selected 10 mid-level managers because they are the future leaders of the port, and it allows them the opportunity to be active, to be engaged, to bring out their thoughts about the way in which they see the port in its current form and begin to set the stage for the next 3 to 5 years of development. Also, as they push it out, now there certainly is participation by the executive and at a lot of different levels, as well as with our stakeholders. But when they push it out, they're pushing it out a shorter distance up to the executive, and they're putting it and they're pushing it down to the rest of the organization. And as they're pushing it up and down, there's a shorter distance to get to to everybody involved. We have surveyed each and every person, each and every employee of the Maryland Port Administration has the opportunity to be able to participate. But the leadership role is by those 10 individuals that have been selected as mid-level managers. We hope with longevity and loyalty that they stay at the MPA and allows them the opportunity to ascend into additional leadership and executive positions. And they have been involved in the development of that short-term strategic business plan. At the same time, we're getting ready to go out on an RFP on the longer vision, the longer term 20-year master vision plan. That is going to be a commercially based program. There will be some components that will have some specific land use options to it as we look at some of the utilization of our terminals and of our available space. So it will be a very broad use. We have not had a long term master vision plan and strategic plan for a lot of years. So there's going to be a lot that we're going to be gathering over this about 1 year process that allows us the opportunity to bring in the stakeholders, the politicians, the community leaders, and they're going to help us to be able to guide that master vision plan, multi-phase, uh, multi-discipline approach to being able to do that. We're going to take a look at areas that we're strong in the world with our trade lanes. We're also going to take a look commercially at areas that fit within some of our existing infrastructure, some areas that we need to get stronger in, and then following that up with an infrastructure development plan as well. At a time, whether you're in Maryland or whether you're in California, when funds for port development are oftentimes difficult to come upon. We have
Mhm.
to make sure that we have strategically an understanding of what the commercial future looks like, but at the same time, what's going to be necessary for us to be able to build out the infrastructure, whether it's new build, building greenfield, whether it's utilizing the brownfields, whether it's just rehabilitation and expansion of our existing structure. We also need to understand what those costs are going to be long term. That gives us the opportunity to go down to the General Assembly and state our case with some background and material, and also be able to show them what the proper return on investment happens to be. And it's a little bit different for a public body. What's great and what I love about our industry is we have the public sector, the government activities certainly that allows us the opportunity to work through, have resources at the larger state level. But you're also subject to all the laws associated with any and every public body. But at the same time, we are commercially based. We're
Mhm.
judged by TEUs, we're judged by tons, we're judged by revenue, and we're judged by the growth year after year. How we're doing that's even better than the previous year. How we continue to set records. Some of that is a little bit of hard level business development. Some of that comes just because of a notification that the industry itself is going in with particular projects, or they see that the trade lane has the opportunity to be able to grow. But we have to be able to plan long term. We will never get to the end of that 20-year master plan. After about 5 or 6 years, what we'll do is we'll go back in and we'll update that as we come to the end of that first phase. Uh, Things change within the organization, geopolitically, commercially, activities throughout the world change, and those changes that occur on a global basis impact us locally. So we need to be able to change. We need to be able to adapt, not only with our short-term strategic business plan, but how that impacts the work that we do on our long-term master vision plan.
It was interesting that when I was at Maritime, we were asked to do a strategic plan for the incoming administration up at Massport, and we came up with 25 points and stuff like that, and then I was offered the job as the deputy director up at Massport, and and we had to boil that down to 5 things.
Yeah,
And we got
yeah,
them all done in 3 years, which was wonderful. But it
yeah,
really emphasizes, I think, in many cases, the importance not only of just strategic planning, but and revisiting what is a dynamic plan, right? But I think the critical thing that you said here, Jonathan, was this. It's your staff. Nobody knows your port better than your staff people do,
yes,
right? And for all the consulting projects and all the other things we do, and they do a wonderful job, right? Giving us data and everything. Ultimately, the decision about the direction you want to make and where you want to head really needs to be with the people who
mhm,
know and understand the port best, right?
yeah,
And your folks are able to do that. And I know you've developed quite a good team there, and
yeah,
you've revamped some of the team that you've had in there, but it's been very workable, and obviously it shows by your ability to respond to a situation, right? To get
absolutely,
back up and running so
absolutely,
quickly. And
yes.
and despite the fact that all the ports are sitting there going like, we'll be happy to help you, Jonathan, and we'll just we'll just take the cargo for now.
Well,
But
and,
they're
and
all
that that was I think that shows even a great scenario over the fact of the flexibility of the supply chain as a whole, the ability to the ability to react, the ability for those ports to step up to have additional capacity. But we were very honest from the beginning. We know that you're going to need to take our cargo for a period of time. Is that the shippers, the end users need to be able to have those goods come and go into this region, and even into our larger hinterland. But the matter of fact is when the time comes, we want our cargo back,
right. And
and
most of it
we're
came back,
and we're
which
and
was
we're gonna
good.
fight. We're gonna fight. For that. We are back. We are ahead in some areas of our operation. We are ahead of where we were even pre-incident. And with the new services coming on board, we hope to be able to surpass all of our business lines. And we're confident that we're going to get there. But again, we do not want to lose. We do not want to lose anything. And we understand it's a competitive business, but we want it back, and we're doing everything that we can with our stakeholders to get it back.
But I always tell everybody, all's fair in love, war, and the port business.
It is. Some of them certainly, as they look, they may see a little bit of a bump, but that's a bump with an asterisk,
That's
based
right.
on what happened in Baltimore.
So, Jonathan, I know that we're focused on helping young executives and young managers think about where their, focus is going to be for planning their careers and doing all of that. What advice would you give to our young and upcoming managers in
You know,
our
I,
industry?
I think one thing, and those people that get into the industry, and it doesn't matter what department they are in within a particular agency. We are such a dynamic industry. There's so much that goes into running a port, depending on a lot of it depends on your form and function. Are you a landlord port? Are you an operating port? It really opens up a wide array of career opportunities and experiences. And there's a lot of outside experiences that people have if they're looking at getting involved in the port industry. One is I think we need to, as a whole, and we do a significant amount of workforce development and outreach in this area. The first thing that we do is we get into the schools, we get into the middle schools, we get into the high schools. technical training, make sure that people understand that there is a future on the waterfront. It may be in more of the manual activities associated with cargo handling through the ILA, through the terminal operations. It could be into the management level with many of those groups, but as well as with the port administration under the state of Maryland. Realize, I think what we find out, and we talk about the fact that this is a very dynamic environment, is that dealing the ability to deal with change, the ability to deal with that quick change that oftentimes is necessary, and that is something in the career that you can certainly work toward maintaining a sense of calm, maintaining a sense of allowing yourself the opportunity to understand that change is going to occur in the environment, and you either need to understand that or change will change you within that, and you're going to be ultimately forced to be able to do that. Um, so what they need to do is understand and look at it is that getting into the maritime industry and getting into the port industry can be very different things. Certainly, those that go to school, go to the state academies, uh, go to Kings Point, uh, that are ultimately going to look at going to the water, have a different understanding when they come ashore from the shore side capabilities as opposed to those that have started on land and have continued on land. But it takes a full level of organizational um, expertise to be able to run that port. Those people that are involved in finance, those people that are involved in marketing, those people that may have an operations background, those that have worked in warehouses, those that have worked in maintenance, engineering, uh, can have a future at the port. Just because they didn't necessarily train in a maritime academy or look at a future that was based around going to a port or on the waterfront does not mean that you can't, after being exposed to that, end up in this type of environment. It is an exciting industry to be involved in. It's a small fraternity. Again, we know each other. We pull upon each other's experience, even though we may be competitors in certain respects. We are in a hyper competitive environment. So those people that take a look at it, and again, it doesn't matter what area of the operation you're involved in, having that level of drive, having that level of understanding that what you're doing has an impact in the economy. And as mentioned before as well, I think those people that want to certainly be involved, there is a level of public service associated with it. At the same time, there's a commercial aspect to it. And so there's a lot of different talents that need to come together to allow a port to be operating with high efficiency, and realize it's not an easy job. All of us have run into those issues that occur on our terminals, and when something occurs at a port, typically it occurs in a very visual fashion, and it's big, and the
Yeah.
impact is big. And unfortunately, when catastrophe hits a port, it hits in a very significant way that impacts people. It impacts the economy at a level that not a lot of people truly understood before those incidents occur.
It seems like all the time that people are in the news, it's because of something bad that's happened. Well, certainly what you've said reflects
Absolutely.
a great deal of what we teach in the management and executive
Yep.
management program. And I want to congratulate you on receiving the accredited maritime port
Thank
executive
you. Thank you.
certification,
Thank
right?
you. Very proud to be able to receive that, to be able to display that, and to be able to continue my education.
And you could
Uh,
ask the governor for a raise.
That that is any time. I tell you what, that's a gentleman that needs a raise as well because of his leadership, not just during the incident and the aftermath associated with that, but in leading us forward. And it does take that team to be able to properly manage. And when you get the type of commitment from the top man in the state, and he joins in with our federal delegation as well. We've got an absolutely fantastic support group and support base, allowing us the opportunity to be able to be progressive in our approach, allowing us the opportunity to go after the funds, to be able to decarbonize, look at an electrification master plan, so that we do not impact our state in a negative fashion. And he is really the driver of that, pushing us. And it's he sets policy. We get the opportunity to make sure that we implement that policy on
That's right.
his behalf.
Always great to have elected officials who understand the value of our reports. It's
They do.
also good for our commissioners to understand that when they look to hire somebody, that they're going to hire somebody who's got a great deal of expertise and experience in the
Yep.
industry, which certainly you bring to the table. And I'm sure you're
Thank you,
going to have
Capt.
a very successful run there in Baltimore.
Thank you.
Jonathan, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time today. It was actually extremely interesting. And of course,
Good.
not the first time we've chatted and stuff, but I'm sure it'll be very insightful for those who will take the opportunity to listen to this broadcast. So, wish you the very best of luck in all things. Keep
Captain,
plugging,
thank you. Thank
keep
you.
growing.
We will keep plugging and look to be a resource for you and for your team to be able to get people access to the industry and make sure that they understand exactly what they're getting into and how rewarding a career this could be.
Well, we will look forward to doing a program up in Baltimore and my seeing you again. Thank you very much
Great.
again for your time
Thank you,
today,
Captain.
and you have
Take
a
care.
great day.
Thank you, sir. Bye bye.